Have you ever seen the light in your man's eyes go out? In an instant, because of one of your words, one of your victories, one of your independent decisions. He silently withdraws into himself, builds a wall, and you are left alone with the agonizing question, what did I do wrong? You think that you hurt his ego, but the truth is much deeper and more dangerous. Without knowing it, you have touched the most shameful and most sacred secret of the male psyche, to what Carl Jung called the anima, his inner woman, his soul. And to understand why he breaks, we must descend into this secret sanctuary. Over the next hour, we will not just analyze this painful dynamic. We will make a contract with you. First, you will understand why your strength and authenticity are perceived by him as a betrayal. Second, you will learn what great task his fragility sets before your soul. And third, you will see the path, how to become a catalyst for his true strength. And your own. If you are ready to learn the truth that men hide even from themselves, our dive begins. Right now. Let's go back to that room. Remember the air that suddenly became thick and cold, the silence that is more deafening than any scream, that spreads across the walls, absorbing all the warmth. You look at him and see not your man, but a stranger, a shell. His gaze is empty, or what's worse, full of a quiet, incomprehensible reproach. And you begin this torturous internal interrogation, replaying the last few minutes in your head over and over again. You become an investigator at a crime scene where intimacy has just been murdered. You go over every word, every gesture, searching for that point, that microsecond when everything broke. What was it? A careless joke? A tone that was too confident? The news of your success, which you shared with such joy? In this deafening silence which spreads through the room like ink and water, you are left alone with a single question that beats in your temples like a trapped bird. This feeling of being an unwilling executioner for the one you love, it eats you up from the inside. It poisons your confidence, makes you doubt your own right to a voice, to an opinion, to success. It is a quiet poison that stays with you long after he starts speaking again, forcing you to be more careful, quieter, more accommodating the next time. And you don't know what is more terrifying, his silence or the part of you that is ready to do anything just so it never happens again. And before this poison of doubt has a chance to poison you more deeply, I want you to hear me now. You are not alone. This silent theater of the absurd plays out behind the closed doors of millions of homes every night, and it has no author, only tired actors, repeating roles they never chose. So let me say this with all the clarity I am capable of. This is not your personal failure. This is not a sign that you are too difficult, too loud, or not feminine enough. This is not proof that you are wrong. Your voice, your strength, your truth. This is not a crime. What you are experiencing is a symptom, not the disease, but only its visible manifestation. A symptom of a deep, ancient drama playing out between the masculine and feminine principles ever since consciousness has existed. And you, without knowing it, have found yourself on the front stage of this eternal conflict, this sacred mystery. Your pain is not a sign of your mistake, but evidence of your participation in something immeasurably larger than a personal story. You are not broken. You are on the front line. And here, in this space where we have absolved you of guilt, I invite you to perform an act of intellectual courage, to look at this drama from a completely paradoxical perspective. What if I told you that this moment of his breakdown is not proof of his weakness, but a distorted, unrecognizable manifestation of his greatest strength? The strength of his connection to something deeply internal, to an ideal that fuels his entire life. What if his withdrawal, this icy wall, is not a punishment for you, but a desperate, clumsy attempt to protect something sacred within himself? Something so fragile that he unconsciously fears that your light, your truth, your reality will simply incinerate it. And finally, what if all this pain, this recurring tragedy, actually hides within it not a sentence for your relationship, but a key to its rebirth on a completely different level of depth that you never even suspected? If this is so, then you are not a victim of his weakness, but an unwilling witness to the secret of his strength. And our task is to learn to read the secret. To understand this paradox, for the key we have found to actually fit the lock, we must first clear the path. We must destroy the myths that, like the thick walls of a prison, prevent us from seeing the truth. These walls are built of popular cliches, half-truth, and our own fears, and they cause us to beat our heads against a wall of misunderstanding again and again. Therefore, our first task is to make a shift in perception. We must stop looking at the surface, at his silence and coldness, and look into the architecture of his soul, to understand not what he does, but why his internal system reacts in this specific way. For this, we will need the scalpel of analysis, not the balm of consolation. Let's start by deconstructing the common misconceptions that poison your understanding and hold you captive in this painful cycle. Let's start with what gets in the way the most. And the first myth, the most common trap for the female mind, sounds like this: he just has a fragile ego. We use this word, ego, as a convenient label for everything we don't understand in a man's reaction. But this is a colossal oversimplification. The ego, in the Jungian sense, is his persona, his social mask, his armor that he wears for the outside world. And yes, you can scratch this armor, but the wound from which he writhes in silence is much deeper. We say ego when we actually mean a gaping wound in the very soul, which this ego is desperately trying to cover up. To blame his ego is like scolding a soldier for a dented shield without noticing the arrow in his heart. The second misconception, even more insidious: he can't stand strong women. This is a dangerous half-truth that hides the essence. Believe me, on a conscious level, he admires your strength, but his unconscious is terrified not of your strength as such. He is afraid of what your strength does to his internal image of a woman. In his psyche, there is a certain file, a certain image of what a woman should be for him to feel safe. And when your real, multifaceted strength does not fit into this narrow file, his internal system returns an error. He breaks not from your strength, but from the cognitive dissonance between you and his internal fantasy. And finally, the third: it's manipulation to make me feel guilty. Sometimes, in the most toxic cases, this may be true. But in the vast majority of cases, it is an unconscious process, almost a reflex, over which he has no conscious control. It's like pulling your hand away from a fire. He doesn't decide, now I will be silent to punish her. His psyche, feeling a threat to something sacred, simply performs an emergency shutdown of all external contacts. He is not the operator of this manipulation, but its first victim. All these explanations are like putting a bandage on a deep wound. We only see the surface, ignoring the infection inside. To understand what is really happening, we must rip off this bandage. If all these explanations are just bandages, then where is the wound itself? To see it, we will need a different lens. Let's become architects of the soul for a moment. Imagine that inside every man there is a secret temple, an inner sanctum where he lets no one enter, and in it, a statue of a goddess. This is not just stone, it is the source of his inspiration, his life force, his connection to the mysteries of being. This statue is his anima, his soul in female form. It gives his life color, meaning, and depth. Without it, his world would be black and white and flat. For years, he built this temple, decorated it, prayed to this goddess, often without even realizing it. And then he meets you, and his soul whispers, "This is her, the living embodiment of my goddess." And then he performs the most dangerous and most sacred act of his life. He carefully, almost unconsciously, takes his internal statue off its pedestal and puts you, a living woman, in its place. Now you are his sanctuary. Your smile is the light in the temple. Your words are his prayers. He doesn't just love you, he draws life itself from you. And this is where the tragedy begins. The very moment you show your human complexity, show your shadow, speak your truth, the truth that does not align with the image of the ideal goddess, you cease to be a perfect statue. His breakdown is not just anger or resentment. It is an earthquake in the temple. It is the moment when he sees with horror that the living woman does not match the statue. And in that moment, it seems to him that it is not your relationship that is collapsing, but the supporting columns of his own universe. His reaction, his silence, his coldness, his withdrawal into himself is a symptom. It is the dust that settles after the collapse. The true cause is the act of sacrilege that, as it seems to him, has occurred in his soul, the desecration of the shrine. He is not mourning the loss of contact with you, but the loss of contact with his soul, which he so unconsciously and so totally entrusted to you. This metaphor may seem beautiful but distant to you. Let's make it alive. Let's fill it with your reality, your pain, your truth. And now I will ask you to do something important, not for me, but for yourself. Remember the last time this happened, when you saw him break. Don't analyze, just return to that feeling, to that deafening silence. And when you are there, ask yourself, what exactly did you do in that moment? Did you express your opinion, which went against his picture of the world? Did you make an important decision without consulting him, showing that your world does not revolve around his axis? Did you achieve success at work that he, perhaps, only dreamed of, and your joy somehow became a reproach to him? Did you show emotional independence when he unconsciously expected comfort or support from you? Or maybe you simply showed a character trait, toughness, pragmatism, ambition, that is not on the pedestal in his inner temple? And now the main question. Look at your offense honestly. Was it not, in its essence, an act of your authenticity, an act of your separateness, an act of your truth? Was it not simply a moment when you, perhaps for the first time in a long time, chose yourself and not his comfort? Pause this video, because the next step in our journey you must take in silence, alone with your own truth. Answer yourself without judgment, without fear. Just state the fact. We will continue when you are ready. If you were honest with yourself, you probably felt a pang of recognition, mixed perhaps with bitterness and relief. Bitterness that your authenticity becomes a source of pain, and relief that there is finally logic in this madness. And I am here to tell you, you are not going crazy. What you have just discovered, this paradox where your strength causes his weakness, where your truth destroys his world, is not your fault. It is a universal drama, a fundamental law of psychic gravity that was discovered and described over 100 years ago. There was a man who dedicated his life to studying precisely such paradoxes, the great Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung. He was not just a scientist, he was a cartographer of the soul. He was the first who dared to descend into these flooded basements of the human psyche with a lantern and a map, giving names to the shadows that everyone feared. It was he who gave a name to that inner goddess in the temple of the male soul we spoke of. He called her the anima, and he gave a precise clinical name to the process that makes a man place a living woman on the pedestal of his soul, the process that turns love into a minefield. He called it projection, the anima and its projection. These two concepts are the key to unlocking the entire drama, because it is in this mechanism, in how a man unconsciously transfers the image of his soul onto you, that the most shameful secret we will uncover today is hidden. The secret of his dependence, his fragility, and, as we will see later, his greatest potential. Now that we have cleared the field of misconceptions, we are ready to enter the very heart of Jung's theory, into the very heart of the mystery. So Jung gave us two keys, anima and projection. Let's use them to finally open the door to this secret room of the male psyche. What is the anima? In a simplified sense, it is the unconscious feminine side of a man. But that is too simple. It is almost an insult to the scale of this idea. The anima is not just a set of feminine qualities like emotionality or caring. Imagine the anima as a bridge that connects his conscious I, his ego, with the boundless, chaotic, and creative ocean of the unconscious. The anima is his inner muse, his guide to the world of dreams, intuition, and creativity. It is the part of his psyche that is responsible for relationships, for a sense of meaning, for a connection to life as a mystery and not as a set of tasks. Without a healthy connection to the anima, a man becomes dry, rigid, alienated from his own feelings and from the depth of being. The problem is that, in our culture, boys are not taught to build this bridge inward. On the contrary, they are taught to be rocks, to suppress feelings, to value logic over intuition. His connection to his own soul, to the anima, atrophies, becomes something vague and frightening. But the need for this bridge does not disappear. And then his psyche does the only thing it can. It begins to search for this bridge outside. He looks in the external world for the woman whose image will perfectly fit the empty space in his soul, like a key to a lock. And so he finds a woman and unconsciously puts the image of his inner goddess onto her. This is projection. He doesn't fall in love with you, exactly. He falls in love with his soul, which he sees in you. He is not consciously deceiving you. For him, this is the most authentic reality. He finally feels whole, alive, connected to the source. You become for him the living embodiment of his own, lost inner world. And here we come to that most shameful secret. He desperately needs this projection. It stabilizes him. It gives him meaning. Without it, he feels lost in a gray, soulless world. He depends on you not as a partner, but as a priestess of his inner temple. You are the one who maintains the sacred fire within him, and he is terrified that you will leave and take this fire with you, leaving him in the cold and dark. His stability, his sense of wholeness, all of it is externalized and invested in you. Therefore, when you do not act as a goddess should, you are not just offending him. You are threatening his entire psychic structure. To make this complex theory crystal clear, let me tell you a story. This is not a story about abstract people, but about a piece of the soul of each of us. This is the story of James and Claire. James was an architect. His world consisted of straight lines, precise proportions, concrete, and glass. He was successful, smart, but inside him was a silence like the emptiness of a huge, uninhabited building. And then Claire, an artist, burst into his life. Her world was a whirlwind of colors, the smell of turpentine, and unpredictable emotions. For James, she was not just a woman, she was a salvation. He saw in her not Claire, but the embodiment of beauty, mystery, and creativity. Everything he lacked so much. He adored her unpredictability, her emotionality, her creative mess. He would say, "You bring me back to life. You bring color to my black and white world." He fell in love with her chaos because it ordered his own inner world. He could sit for hours in her studio, doing nothing, just breathing the air that seemed alive to him. But a few years passed. Claire grew tired of being just a muse, existing for the inspiration of another. She decided to open her own gallery. She immersed herself in business plans, negotiations with investors, marketing. She became focused, pragmatic, sometimes tough. And James began to change. He became irritable and silent. He began to reproach her for becoming different, losing her magic, turning into a businesswoman. The climax came on the opening day of her gallery. It was a triumph. Claire, radiant, confident, surrounded by people, was incredibly beautiful in her strength. In the evening, she came home, overflowing with happiness, ready to share it with the man she loved. And he met her with an icy silence. He sat in the semi-darkness of the living room, and in his eyes was not joy for her, but a deep, quiet grief. Why? Because James was not in love with Claire. He was in love with his projection onto her. In his inner temple, the muse goddess could not be a successful entrepreneur. His statue of a gentle, chaotic fairy could not bear the weight of her real ambitions and cracked. And instead of being happy for the living woman, he mourned his shattered illusion. He grieved the death of his fantasy, not noticing that a real queen had been born next to him. This story is over. And now let's talk about yours. Because if you change the names and professions, isn't this your story? Isn't Claire you? Claire is you. Every time your logical argument is stronger than his, every time your career ambition makes you work late instead of providing him with a quiet, cozy evening, every time your emotional self-sufficiency allows you to handle a problem alone without needing him to rescue you, every time you display a quality that does not fit into his idealized unconscious image. Imagine this gilded statue in his soul. It is beautiful, but it is static. It is predictable. It is convenient. Your reality is not a soft brush, but a sharp sculptor's chisel. Your human complexity, your shadow, your fatigue, your anger, your strength, your reality are the blows of the chisel that scratch and knock the gilding off his inner statue, revealing the cold, lifeless stone of his fantasy beneath it. He fell in love with the gilding, and you are forcing him to see the stone. And here we come to the very heart of your pain. He breaks, not because you did something bad. He breaks because reality is invading his fragile, unconscious world of fantasies. His pain is absolutely real, but he is mistaken about its source. He thinks you are causing the pain, but in reality, the pain is caused by the shattering of his illusion, and you are merely the bearer of this inconvenient truth. He behaves like a man who gets angry at a mirror for showing him his wrinkles. You are that mirror, and the more real you are, the more merciless that mirror is. And the most cruel, most unjust thing in this drama lies in a simple, devastating fact. Your greatest asset, your authenticity, is perceived by him as the greatest betrayal. The very light that you have cultivated in yourself for so long, the very strength that you have won from the world, the very truth for which you have paid with scars, all of this becomes a weapon for his unconscious, destroying his sanctuary. You come to him with the cup of your victory, and he sees in it only poison for his dream, and he mourns the death of a ghost, not noticing that a living, loving woman is standing before him. Realizing this paradox is painful. It's like pulling a shard of glass from a wound. First a sharp pain, and then the first clean breath of healing. But for this liberation to become real, for the wound to begin to heal, you need to name what has wounded you. You need to name the role you have outgrown, the mask that has become too tight for your soul. And now let's take another step deeper, a step that requires utmost honesty. I want you to ask yourself one question, not with your mind, but with your soul. What role, what function is your soul tired of playing for him? The role of the eternal muse, who is obliged to be unpredictable and ethereal, but never pragmatic and tired. The role of the caring mother, whose job is to always understand, comfort, and heal his wounds, but never to show her own. The role of the quiet, convenient backdrop for his achievements, whose main virtue is not to cast a shadow on him with her own light. The role of the perfect mirror, which should reflect only his greatness, but never his flaws or her own reality, separate from him. And the second, even more important question, what part of your true self is desperately trying to break through to the light, even if it threatens to destroy his temple? What businesswoman is tired of pretending to be an artist? What queen inside you is tired of playing the role of a servant? What scientist, what strategist, what leader is bursting out from under the mask of a sweet and compliant companion? These are very important questions, and I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments, but not to complain or blame, but to bear witness to the truth of your soul. This is not a complaint. This is an act of exorcism, casting out from your soul the image that does not belong to you. Write in the comments not what he sees in you, but who you are tired of being for him. Let's create a space under this video where these stories can be told and heard without judgment. A digital sanctuary where the truth of every woman will matter. Read the stories of others. You will see that you are not just not alone, you are part of a huge silent sisterhood. You will see a tapestry of thousands of stories similar to yours. Your voice is needed, and perhaps by reading someone else's story, you will help someone find the words for their own. What you share in the comments are not just stories. They are testimonies. Testimonies of how the soul is trying to break free from an old, tight form. And this brings us to the most important, most transformative question. Not why this is happening, but for what purpose? Until this moment, you most likely saw his breakdown as a problem to be solved, as your guilt to be atoned for, as an annoying bug in the code of your relationship that needs to be fixed so the program can run smoothly again. You were looking for the right words, the right behavior, trying to become someone who would not press this red button. I suggest you look at it differently, radically differently. This crisis is not a problem. It is an invitation. It is a call from the soul, his and yours, to grow. It is a signal that the old contract, based on illusion, no longer works. The soul demands more. It demands truth, even if that truth burns. In the ancient science of alchemy, which Jung considered a metaphor for the process of individuation, there is a key stage, solutio, dissolution. To create something new and durable, the alchemical gold of a genuine connection, the old, false, and rigid structures, the lead of projections, must be completely dissolved in acid. Your relationship has entered the sacred fire of transformation, and the smoke you see is not the smoke of a fire, but the smoke in which everything unreal is burning. His projections, your masks, your mutual unconscious expectations. Every time he breaks under the pressure of your authenticity, this is the alchemical process in action. It is the painful dissolution of illusion so that a genuine connection between two real, separate people can be born in its place. You are not a destroyer. You are an alchemical agent, a catalyst, bringing the acid of truth into the crucible where the lead of his fantasies is melting. And this is your great, though agonizing, role in this sacred drama. You are not breaking him. You are helping him to be reborn. But how does this alchemy happen in practice? It begins with the most difficult decision a woman can make in a relationship, the decision to shift the focus from his reaction to her own wholeness. And here we come to the hardest part, because all your instinctive, centuries-bred female wisdom screams at you, comfort him, fix it, put everything back the way it was. Be softer, be quieter, be more accommodating. And this path seems so right, but it is a trap. Your task is not to learn to walk on tiptoes around his inner temple, afraid to disturb the fragile statue. Your task is not to amputate parts of your personality just so his illusion remains intact. This is the path to the slow death of your soul. It is a betrayal of yourself for the sake of preserving his fantasy. The true path requires enormous, almost superhuman courage. It consists in allowing his illusion to be shattered. It consists in continuing to be yourself, strong, smart, ambitious, real, and allowing his inner temple to be shaken to its foundations. Your new task is to withstand his pain, his coldness, his silent reproaches, without taking them personally. This is the hardest part. In the moment of his withdrawal, learn to say to yourself, what I see is his grief. He is not grieving for me, but for his fantasy, which I have just destroyed with my truth. His pain is real, but I am not its cause. I am only the catalyst. It is his job and his alone to pick up the pieces of his soul and learn to see the real woman before him. It is his path to stop looking for his soul outside and finally start building that bridge within himself. In Jung's language, this is called the integration of the anima. This is the greatest task of a man's life, and your task is not to be a nursemaid for his illusions, but to be a midwife for his reality, no matter how painful its birth may be. You must remain that rock of truth against which his projections will shatter, so that he can finally see the ocean of his own soul. To say, I will withstand his pain is easy, but how do you do it when your heart is breaking and all your instincts are screaming to save and fix? For this, you need internal supports. You need practice. Let me give you 2 tools to build them. These are not life hacks, but spiritual exercises that require discipline. First, the practice of the sacred boundary. This is what you do in the most acute moment. When the air in the room becomes cold, instead of fussing, apologizing, trying to fix his mood, you internally freeze. You take a deep breath and mentally and over time, perhaps out loud, calmly and gently, say the formula, I see your pain, I respect your feelings, but I am not their cause. I am here as a real woman when you are ready to talk to a real woman. Why does this work? Because you are doing 3 crucial things. First, you acknowledge his feelings without devaluing them. Second, you remove responsibility for them from yourself, breaking the toxic cycle of guilt. And third, you leave the door open for contact, but only for contact between 2 adults, not a mother-offended child contact. This phrase is not a wall you build between you, but a bridge you extend to his adult part, bypassing his wounded inner child. This is not aggression, it is utmost clarity and love. Second, the authenticity journal. This is your daily practice for strengthening your inner core. Every evening, before bed, write down in a journal one moment from the day when you acted in accordance with your truth, especially if it caused tension or disapproval. It doesn't have to be something heroic. I expressed my opinion at the meeting, even though I was afraid. I declined an invitation because I felt tired, not because it would be convenient for others. I honestly told my partner that his joke hurt me. Why does this work? Because the hurricane of his projections is strong. It can sweep you away, make you doubt yourself. This journal is your anchor. Rereading it, you create tangible proof day by day of the existence of your true I. You are training your authenticity muscle. This strengthens your own core so that when his internal earthquake begins, you can stand firm, not succumbing to the temptation to become a convenient statue in his temple again. You are building your own temple within yourself. These practices are not just techniques, they are rituals of returning to yourself. And when you begin to apply them, strengthening your inner core day by day, you will understand one simple but liberating truth about your strength, your independence, your truth. It is not a weapon that wounds him. It is medicine that can heal him from the deepest addiction, the addiction to illusions. From the habit of searching for his soul in someone else instead of finding it within himself. It is a bitter medicine, yes. It has a terrible taste. Its side effects are coldness, silence, distance. But only it leads to true healing. Any other treatment, your softness, your adjustment, your willingness to be convenient, is just a painkiller that prolongs the illness and makes the addiction even stronger. Your authenticity is the only surgery capable of removing the tumor of his projections. Therefore, I ask you right now to make an internal shift. Stop seeing yourself as a destroyer. You are not an earthquake destroying his temple. You are the light that penetrates through the cracks in the walls and shows that the statue he prayed to was made of plaster. Start seeing yourself as the one who brings the light of truth into the dark temple of fantasies. The one who, by her very existence, challenges his illusions and thereby, perhaps against his will, pushes him toward his own light. This is the role of a real, living anima, not a silent statue. A living anima is not a comforter. It is a guide. And a guide does not always lead along easy and pleasant paths. Sometimes it leads through darkness, because it knows that this is the only way to reach the true dawn. You are his guide from the world of shadows to the world of reality. And this is not a curse, but a sacred and difficult mission. We have come a long way in this hour, from the pain of misunderstanding to clarity, from the chaos of doubt to the coherent architecture of understanding. Let us now gather all the golden threads of our journey into one pattern, into one crystal clear truth. So, what is the main shameful secret of the male psyche? The secret that makes him break when you simply become yourself? It is not that he is weak. No, his strength is enormous. But this strength often unconsciously depends on a woman as an external carrier of his soul. He projects his anima, his inner goddess, onto you, and his own sense of meaning, his connection to life, all of it ends up in your hands. He breaks not when a woman does something wrong. He breaks when a woman stops being a projection and becomes herself. When she refuses to be a perfect statue and chooses to be a living, breathing, complex human being. When she chooses her truth, her strength, her authenticity. And the greatest act of love you can perform is not to adapt to his illusions. It is to have the courage to be yourself. It is with your authenticity that you invite him to abandon the projection. It is with your reality that you show him where to look for his soul, within himself, not in you. This is not an act of betrayal, it is an act of liberation, for him and for you. This insight is not just knowledge, it is a key to a door behind which a completely different relationship awaits. Imagine a relationship built not on a fragile projection, but on the granite foundation of two whole souls. A relationship where your strength does not threaten, but inspires. Where his silence is replaced by dialogue. A dialogue about what is happening in his soul, not just in his day. Where your authenticity is not a cause for crisis, but a source of mutual pride. Imagine a world where you both are not looking at each other in a desperate search for rescue, but together in the same direction, toward your shared path, your common meaning, where you are not the carriers of each other's souls, but two guides walking side by side, each with their own lantern, lighting the way for each other in the darkness. This path is not easier. It requires daily awareness. It requires the courage to see each other not as ideals, but as living, imperfect people with their own shadows and light. It requires him to find his anima within in you, to remain true to yourself even when it is difficult. But this is the only path to a love that breathes, to an intimacy that is not afraid of the truth. This is the only path to a love that liberates rather than enslaves. Before we finish, I want to tell you something personally. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for walking this path to the end. This was not just watching a video. It was an act of inner work. It takes courage to look into such deep and sometimes painful things without turning away. And know this, from this moment on, you are no longer alone in your search. The very fact that you have reached these words makes you part of an invisible but powerful community. You are part of a community of people who choose awareness over illusions, truth over comfort, people who are willing to look their shadows in the eye to find their light. Everyone who seeks depth in this superficial world is your ally, and I am immensely grateful for the opportunity to be part of this journey with you. Thank you for your trust. If this journey was valuable to you, if you felt a resonance in your soul, then I invite you to continue this path together. Subscribe to this channel. But know that this is not just clicking a button. It is your declaration of intent, your yes to your own growth, your commitment not to stop at the surface, but to continue descending into the depths where the real treasures are hidden. Every like, every thoughtful comment you share, these are not just numbers. It is a signal that such depth is important and needed. With this, you help this light break through the noise of superficial content, creating a demand for authenticity. You become part of a movement that is returning the soul to the world. Click the bell icon so you don't miss our next dive. And in the meantime, and remember, your task is not to be perfect for him, but to be true to yourself.